Yeah, you are likely saturated with news of Dragons Dogma 2. Maybe your feed is eclipsed by people butchering their pals, but you will be seeing more and more news videos about this game. Because one thing will become true, Dragons Dogma 2 release will be a wrecking ball. This will get more coverage than the next Blizzard scandal. People will talk about it and it will not be like the release of the first game. But today we are not here to do another react video to the next piece of information about this game. We are here to talk about the last brother of Skyrim and Dark Souls that got forgotten in the mall, rotting away in some GameStop shelf. And I always wonder, why did it take so long for people to notice Dragons Dogma? Now it seems like RPG fans know about the game, but make no mistake, most of the gamers have no idea this game exists. It even felt like some RPG players didn't know it existed for quite a while. I bet you, if you ask some friends that don't play too many RPG games about Dragons Dogma, they probably have no idea what you're talking about. So for this video I will become your game journalist from Wish and we will find out what happened to the original game. Believe me, I have done some intensive research that mostly involves using filters in Google search. I push hard through the deeps of the internet for you, until I reach a video that defeated my will to go any further. If you wonder what it was a video of the Cyclops of Dragons Dogma dancing to the beat of K-pop. It's not an exaggeration, it's not a bad joke, it's a scene that I had to witness. Now you have seen it too. Jokes aside, Dragons Dogma is a game that actually holds well nowadays. Not graphically, but it's still fun to play and it has some unique concepts. Some of them more controversial than others, like the use of the pound system. Yet the question is, how did it take so long to go from "what the hell are you talking about" to "oh yes, I know that game"? Well, this requires from one of the most important things for everything: context. Get ready for some facts and sales numbers. We're going back to the great era of RPGs. This game was released in 2012, when a good amount of you were still in the beta stage of growth, playing Call of Duty and dreaming of what Battlefield would become in a decade, just to realize that it would be meme and overthrown by games like Fortnite. Life's a bitch with no forgiveness. This great era was what I like to call the RPG Renaissance, that I will declare between 2007 and 2012. Some of the most famous sagas were released around this era: Fallout 3, New Vegas, The Assassin's Creed, The Witcher, Dragon Age, and many more. It was a beautiful era, before the free-to-play lootbox explosion. The amount of new good IPs was just incredible. To be fair, Capcom really deserves some praise to release this game at that time. They took a massive risk. They really showed their cojones. Not only was Dragons Dogma their first open-world title, which is already hard to pull off, it was also a new IP. But if that's not crazy enough for you, the competition between 2011 and 2012 were games such as Witcher 2, Dragon Age 2, Borderlands 2, and breaking the pattern Mass Effect 3. I missed that game. But their direct competition was Dark Souls and Skyrim. You heard that right, they attempted one of their most ambitious projects at the time of those two giants. This time they really went hardcore mode without playing the tutorial. They also had another side quest. They were targeting hardcore or semi-hardcore players, while also attempting to reach the Western audience. This was bold. Many companies from the East have failed. It seems like the cultural gap is too big in some cases, especially regarding monetization, although that not applies here. To name some examples, Dynasty Warriors, Monster Hunter before coming to PC, or Demon's Souls. Although maybe you knew them, these games were not that popular outside of some dedicated fan circles. And actually Dark Souls did a great job of achieving this objective of expanding to the West. But although some of us didn't know about Dark Souls back in the day, I believe its success resides more in the consolidation of a legacy over the years, getting more popularity after each release. They could have gone the route of die as a hero or end up becoming a villain. Those games that prefer to change the skin of the game and release every couple of years, rather than take risks and develop a better game after each iteration. Yet what they achieved was the alternate ending. They went into the Hall of Fame, getting their formula replicated over and over. Will Dragons Dogma 2 become the start of another legacy? I really hope so. But the people at Capcom were not crazy, they were betting high, and that's a fact. But they knew that potentially they could reach about 10 million copies. That is a massive hit at the time, especially because they were planning to release only in PS3 and Xbox. Keep in mind that the new consoles released the next year, and that there are many RPG fans on PC. Also, the most sold game of that year was Black Ops 2 with 11 million copies. Now in this, I feel like this goal of reaching 10 million copies seems like something that sells well for marketing and getting your budget for the project approved. But they were already a veteran company. Regardless of this, they knew that as long as they reached above 1 million copies, the game could be called a success, and they would be safe. To even give you more context, Dark Souls sold 1.5 million copies in the 6 months before the release of Dragons Dogma, and Skyrim 3.5 million in 48 hours. That game was really a monster. If you are not familiarized with Capcom, they may seem like crazy pushovers. However, they were a massive well-known company. Yes, they had their ups and downs, but they have recently released Monster Hunter Freedom 3 for only the PSP, and that was good enough to reach 4.5 million copies. Watching this video in 2024, those numbers may seem somewhat small, and the truth is that the gaming market has grown a lot. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom was one of the most sold games, reaching around 20 million copies, and there were several games around those numbers. But being real, gaming companies are not known for their transparency about total copies sold. It can be painfully hard to get exact figures. Let us say that around 20 million is the home run needed to stand at the top of the rankings. Their goal, however, was 10 million copies, which would have established them as a truly strong RPG franchise. But let's say it. First RPG open world you develop, on consoles, at the end of their time. It's like when people tell you they plan to retire by the age of 40. You want to support them, but you have a feeling they will attempt to become the next Tai Lopez selling online courses. But if you are ambitious, shooting for the stars is a fair strategy to reach the moon, their 1 million target. Although they did plan to have a moon stage, that never happened. For them, the reality of developing this game was a hard journey ahead. Quoting them, "Everything was a first for us, which meant a lot of trial and error." The first issue that they encountered was that generating the world was extremely expensive, as you can imagine. For any big open world game, the amount of art assets that you have to create is really extremely high, and it takes a lot of time and resources. Also, there are many technical challenges involving loading those assets to avoid performance issues, especially if you want to limit the amount of loading screens. Everything was completely different to other successful linear games that they were releasing, like Devil May Cry 4, where switching stages allows you to load the assets. At the end, they had complaints for poor frame rate. These struggles during development took a serious toll on the game. I didn't end up loving it, but it could have been far better. For example, the final map was at least half of what was planned. Believe it or not, one of the final stages, as I said, was in the moon, and that is nowhere to be seen. And while we know of that specific example, I am sure that they were planning to achieve a lot more. At the end, many times a game is not what the developers want, but what the time and the budget allows. Although that is of course not an excuse for false promises or misleading marketing, as we have seen with some games. I really believe, or I want to believe, that this time they can fulfill what they envision and give us something worth it to compete for Game of the Year. This cuts in quality and content, transforming quite the critics. People were complaining about having to revisit the same locations multiple times, bad inventory system, bad AI, poor frame rate, a shallow narrative, which some critics define like as interesting as porridge. Personally, it does feel like a lot of the development time was centered around the combat, which is one of the fortes of the company and where the game truly shines. It really saved the game. It just needed some areas polished. They released Dark Horizon not much later, which brought more content, armors, skills, new zones with new enemies, but it was still not enough to reach their desired goal. So by now you probably want to know the final results, and why the community around Dragons Dogma took so long to form. The reality is that they sold 1.3 million copies by the end of 2013, which was great. Those numbers were good numbers. Amazing for some studios, but too far away from mainstream popularity. The decision to launch only in consoles in 2012, which was the last year of that generation before PS4 and Xbox One, doomed the game to not having a long lifespan. That dificulted steady game growth, and that was the case until their release in PC in 2016 and new consoles in 2017, which brought renewed attention to the game. PC fans were demanding the game for a long time, and people with new consoles could finally play it. Overall, since the game was good and people now had access to it, it was allowed to grow in terms of popularity, slowly becoming more and more recognized. Things are very different now, and the game series stands around 8 million copies sold between different platforms, which explains why a lot more people know about it now. Sadly, I believe that with a bit more cooking time, which realistically they couldn't have since they were reaching the end of the era for those consoles, the game would have been much more popular. And I don't know about you guys, but that is what makes me optimistic about Dragons Dogma 2. I think this time around they will be able to drop a massive hit ready to contend for Game of the Year. Let's cross fingers.